And just like that, we are back. This is the Unacceptables live stream and podcast. I am Scott. This is Jay. Welcome to Sunday night. Jay, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Scott, your volume is a little low and a little. There's a little bit of wish wash there.
Alrighty, we'll try and get that fixed up for you. Give me a second here.
Oh, it's good there.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
We're good. All right. I hope you guys can hear me at home. Jay, how's the weather out there? How's your connection?
Uh yeah, that's my connection is about as good as it can be. It seems for people who live on the side of a mountain. Here, here it's been foggy and really heavily rainy for 4 days now. We're almost out of snow now. So yeah, it's been okay that way. It's warm. I mean, it's warm for this time of year, that's for sure. I would have liked to have saved a little snow for runoff, but it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. We had sun pretty much from mid morning yesterday through to kind of the end of the day, obviously. And then
Nice,
the rain
nice.
started, I think around 1 p.m. today, which was nice. It was nice to get
Yeah,
outside, get some things done. I got a project I've been waiting to do for quite a while. I got that done, so that was exciting
hmm
for us around
yeah.
here. So, folks, we have quite the show for you. A little preamble here for you, just to get reacquainted. We have quite the show for you. We're going to talk about a couple of things. You guys will notice at the bottom of the stream, there's always a ticker going. That will give you the rundown of the show as well as our contact info. So follow us on all the socials, TikTok and what have you, YouTube, Twitter, etc. You can find us there and follow us on Telegram. If you're not on our Telegram page, you should be on it. The link is in the ticker at the bottom there. Jay, so I'm going to open us up here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about communism taking over Canada. And I'm going to start us here with just this first clip here. So, for everybody at home, this is Yuri Bezmenov talking about ideological subversion. So, pay close attention to what this guy says. It'll be about a 3-minute clip, and then we'll come back after that. Okay? We'll be right back.
Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage
Geez, he's a creepy fuck. My favorite part in that clip, Jay, is when he's talking about how the crushing of his balls will wake him up. That's my favorite part, I think, in that video.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's unfortunately a large group of people who that's gonna be the case, right?
Yeah. I mean, so if you guys are following along, listening to that creepy fuck, you can hear him talk about how the first stage is, demoralization. And does it not seem eerily familiar with the current situation in our Western world right now, where there's almost no moral compass anymore? And I don't mean to lead here.
Yep.
I'm gonna play the other half of this interview, or the other half of this clip, and we'll talk about the rest and why I'm playing this. All right, so here's the other half of this creepy fuck Yuri.
demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster.
Well, if that's not creepy, I don't know what is. Hey, Yuri, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? Oh, just destabilizing the Western world and crumbling democracy as you know it, taking over the world, through taking over your universities and different positions in your government, and just nothing big.
Yeah,
Jesus.
and which is exactly what's happening in the other direction. Certainly that's what the Cold War was about. That was both sides figured out exactly how to get how to destabilize their enemy and their enemies in those ways. And you have to go through information. And what people fail to realize the importance of the freedom of speech is if you don't have freedom of speech, you don't actually have freedom of thought, because thought comes from our interaction with the world. It's not subjective, it's objective. And so if you don't have free and open interaction with the world around you, then you are not able to think. And that's where that whole area of indoctrination comes from, is you don't have to literally ban TV shows or anything in order to remove people's free speech. You just take control of those all methods of people getting information, and put what you want in there, and it looks a lot prettier. Nobody knew what the New York Times was up to until 2019. They got away with it for a really long time, before anybody said, "Hey, they're only printing half of the story," right? Because it was like this pinnacle of journalism for so long. And
Not only do they not have to cancel a TV program, but they can actually make you feel bad and make the rest of society vilify you for having that free speech. And then you won't be willing to stick your neck out and be an ist or an ism or any of these other things, because you look bad. You are going to feel morally, obtuse, and want to stop doing the behavior that is, for most of society, a bad thing, even though it may not necessarily be a bad thing. Speaking your mind, or having an opinion, or having a religion, or whatever it might be. It's basically to the point now where society believes it is, because they've been programmed, demoralized to think that.
Yeah.
And you can show people the proof of this, just like we just are now, or I just did now, and they still won't believe it. And that is called the confirmation bias, which he does refer to in that, where despite the fact that you show them that it's very morally wrong to do these things, and to surgically remove or alter a child's genitalia or something like that, even though it's morally wrong, we're going to make you feel like you should feel bad for saying that's morally wrong, so we're going to allow it to happen. And that's exactly what's happened here. So in all of this, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So there's been some stories floating around Canada. I opened with this video on purpose because we have something happening in Canada. It's been going on for a long time. I don't think people fully realize the complexity and just how deep it actually goes. And what I'm referring to is literally the Chinese infiltrating our whole country, and it's being done right in front of your eyes, and you don't even know it. And I'm going to start here with basically a story you guys have probably all heard about there being some Chinese police forces in Canada, or Chinese police stations in Canada. And Jay, I'm going to take the screen up to here for a second to see if this works here. For those of you at home, we're going to try and bring this window in here. Give me 1 second here. I hope this works. Should work if I get this here. All right. Let's see here.
Yeah,
all right. So
we have
you've
screen
got,
share.
all right, there we go. So here's the title: RCMP. Let me just look at this. Investigating Chinese police stations. I'm going to read this because some people will be listening to this, so I'd rather read this and have them have to look it up in the live stream and have us refer to it in some way that might confuse them. So the RCMP investigating Chinese police stations in Canada. The human rights group say more than 50 exist worldwide, including 3 in the Greater Toronto area. There are at least 3 Chinese police outposts in and around the Toronto area in predominantly Chinese neighborhoods, according to a report by human rights group Safeguard Defenders, who say they're being used to pressure some nationals to return to China. Now, the RCMP says it's investigating whether any criminal activity is taking place. The RCMP says it's investigating Chinese police stations in Canada. This comes after Spain-based human rights group Safeguard Defenders reported that more than 50 exist worldwide, including 3 in the GTA, in predominantly Chinese communities. They include a residential home and single-story commercial in Markham and in a convenience store in Scarborough. In most countries, we believe it's a network of individuals rather than a physical police station where people will be dragged into, said Laura Hart, the campaign director at Safeguard there, Safeguard Defenders. It's completely illegal under international law. It's a severe violation of territorial sovereignty. Well, it is, but I've heard quotes that say that in some cases, at least anyways, we are sort of to look at things like, where does the Canadian government end and where does the Chinese government begin, or vice versa? Because we are so deeply involved with them. And this should scare people. We don't want to be involved with the Chinese government. They're communists, and they don't like us. They want to take over our country and our resources. Don't let them fool you. I'm not being racist here. This has been their plan for going on 50 years. And if you don't believe me,
it's not an ethnic it's not ethnic related. It's not like the culture of Chinese people is attacking us. It's a government. It's the Chinese government. That's the difference between racism and political speeches. In Scott's case here, he's talking about 12 people who represent 1 billion people. It's not the billion people that are the problem. It's the people who are in charge of, or who are in total control of those 1 billion people. Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is again not a racist thing. I have nothing against any race, religion, or creed. It is simply the mentality and the modality that concerns me a great deal, because it is not how we operate. It is not as what we would consider a free society. And I think that having Chinese troops train in our country in cold weather combat should scare people. I think that having Chinese spies being caught at our only level 4 biolab in Winnipeg, where coincidentally they were doing gain of function research. I'm going to bring that clip or that up right now, Jay. Give me 1 second here.
I've got no sound for you, Scott.
Well, this would be why. Here we go. Okay, we're back here. Okay, so here's another one for you. A wake-up call for Canada. Security experts say case of 2 fired scientists should or could point to espionage. So China says its scientific cooperation with Canada should not be politicized, responding to questions about 2 scientists fired from Canada's only level 4 lab in Winnipeg, a case that has led to an RCMP investigation, demands for details in Parliament, and concerns about Chinese espionage. Very few people know why Dr. Xingjiang Qiu and her biologist husband Keding Chang were marched out of the Winnipeg National Microbiology Lab, NML, 2 years ago and stripped of their security clearance. However, 2 national security experts believe that the case of scientists raised the possibility of Chinese espionage. It appears that it appears what you might well call Chinese agents infiltrated one of the highest prized national security elements when it comes to biosecurity and biodefense, said Christian Uprix, or who gives a fuck, a security expert and professor at the Royal Military College in Queen's University. So there's that, just sort of regular old, whatever. We're just going to have some people in our, most secure lab, just doing their thing, doing some research and performing some gain of function research. Coincidentally, right before the outbreak of you guys know. Everybody knows who's watched us for a while and who's paid any attention the last 3 years, what happened. And there's a lot of plausibility to the lab leak theory. And certainly, those of you who don't know, certainly there is interest from the Trudeau Foundation, since they are 40% owners of Aquitas, who is the developer and holds a patent on the lipid nanoparticle. Go figure. So tell me about conflict of interest there, would you?
It doesn't seem that conflict of interest. This is kind of one of the things that that left-wing government has kind of given the Western world in general. I say the Western world because it's beyond Canada's borders. I mean, as is the Chinese spies. I mean, Eric Swalwell, U.S. congressman, got burned for for his extracurricular activities involving a Chinese spy.
He was banging Fang Fang, the Chinese spy. Fang Fang, you remember her? Remember her, Eric? How come nobody's investigating Eric Swalwell? That's what I want.
And that's exactly the thing. Is the one thing that that liberal government has given the Western world is sort of this extremely high threshold of tolerance for conflicts of interest, and it's kind of gotten worse and worse and worse to the point where now, like, our current liberal government has been found guilty by the ethics commission 4 times, and that's acceptable to, and not just is that not being prosecuted at any level. Their own voters are not at all concerned about that, and that's fine. If you're a liberal voter, then 4 trips to the ethics commission is what you're going for when you elect, I guess.
The only prime minister in our history who was found guilty of ethics violations and not prosecuted. Just keep that in mind, people. The only prime minister in our history who was found guilty, I've said this before, I'm going to repeat myself, but talk about, your PR management skills. How to get people to forget about one thing is to do another bad thing. So if you're going to have one huge thing, like a scandal of the, Winnipeg lab scandal, have another scandal so people forget that scandal and they'll just move on, because people's attention span, as we've talked about many times on this channel and in the stream, is about 30 seconds long. We have the average person has about the attention span of a goldfish. So if it's not in their radar every day, they forget about it literally a day later. And that's what they're playing on. What they're preying on and what they're playing on is the fact that you'll forget about the last scandal with another scandal.
and also to go back to the opening videos there too. It's also normalization too. It's that if it doesn't elicit enough of a reaction to begin with, then it'll be dismissed almost immediately. Because we,
100.
as a species, we look for novelty, and if something isn't novel, then we go, well, it's not that important, right? And so even that can, and then you can go, okay, so now it's not even just people with a low attention span. It's people who may have a really high IQ, but that's just normal run of the mill. There's a liberal politician found guilty of ethics crimes. Okay, well, that's not news, so filing that under yesterday's news. And
exactly, demoralization 101, right? I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, if you're not expecting yourself to be held to a higher moral standard, and you're not expecting your politicians to be held to a higher moral standard, which they should, as should many people in different various offices and such, police, CSIS, etc. They should be held to a higher moral standard. And if you're not expecting that to happen because your moral compass is so down in the dirt that you don't give a shit, then it's not going to raise any alarm bells when there's 75 scandals in the span of a couple of years. And I think that's the thing to remember. And I mean, talk about a sign of how far down the drain our moral compass and our moral standards are. In Canada, we now are offering medical assistance in dying. And we here in Canada, proudly killed 37,000 people last year. We previously quoted you about 10,000. The actual figure is 37,000. And so I want to show just a little bit of that here. I'm going to try and bring this up here. I don't know if I can actually bring this up properly. They're offering it to veterans now. So if a veteran calls in to, say, a suicide hotline or a Veterans Affairs support and says, I'm feeling really shitty, I'm having a lot of memories about some sort of PTSD event, maybe it was a buddy of his dying in his arms or who knows what. Well, guess what? They're going to offer us MAID now. Go figure. I'm going to bring this up here for you, Jay. Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to go like this. All right. So look at this beauty here. There was a caseworker accused of offering veterans-assisted deaths. No longer works for Veterans Affairs, they say, but the fact that it was offered in the first place is a real big problem, I would say. Now, notice the headline here says, Department won't say if the unidentified ex-employee resigned or was fired. A federal caseworker who allegedly offered at least 4 Canadian military veterans the option, 4, not just 1, 4, the option of medically assisted death is no longer working for Veterans Affairs Canada's. Excuse me. A spokesperson for the Veterans Minister said Tuesday. Erica Lashbrook-Knutson, press secretary to Veterans Affairs Minister Lawrence McCullough, told CBC News that a labor relations process involving the employee is now complete and the individual is no longer working or no longer employed by the department. She would not say whether the employee who has not been identified public was fired or resigned voluntarily. No other details were revealed. Now, I tell you what, Jay, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm thinking that they should make that person's details public and that they should, perhaps prosecute them. Just a thought.
I mean, I don't see why that person's name is protected.
I don't.
That's for sure. I mean, you can't give away somebody's location. That's crazy. But their name. I mean, if you screw up, one of the only ways that we have as societies to actually keep people from behaving in a way that's antisocial and negatively affects everybody but themselves. One of the only things that we have is your name, your legacy. You don't want your name to be garbage, and if you do something wrong, then at the very least, your name should be as garbage as whatever you've done. If you've been really racist, then people should publicly know that your name is attributed to somebody who isn't of the highest moral caliber. It's why we have names and surnames. It's one of the ways that we create accountability. within our little societies and things. And so,
Okay.
yeah, you're right. It has to be, and I mean, another thing, and this is Canada in general. One thing I would, and I've mentioned this to people in politics, etc., is we should have televised court hearings wherever possible. Um, that should be something that we have access to on the level that they have access to in all of the rest of the Western world. This whole, Canadian trials being treated like tribunals. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't see
yeah,
any value in it,
exactly.
and in making people have to read transcripts.
No.
I don't see the benefit of that. So, and so then, but that
You know
goes
what?
to just like you're saying, is like, why are these people protected to this level? That's why they're criminals, is because there's protection in place for it.
And that's precisely it. I think it's safe to say that if you do something wrong on one side of the aisle, you'll be protected. And if you do something wrong on the other side of the aisle, even remotely slightly considered wrong, and when I
Mhm.
say wrong, not necessarily illegal, but just considered morally wrong by today's standards, which we've just discussed are morally impugnant at best. If you do something wrong on the other side of the aisle, nothing's going to be done of it. You'll be offered protection. But on this side of the aisle, let's say, not to promote divisiveness, but on this side of the aisle, you will be persecuted, and it will be publicized everywhere, and it will be made. You'll be dragged through the political mud and through the media mud, so to speak, just because it's oh, you must be an ist or an ism because you said this or you did this. And well, no, what if some people actually believe things like we should have taxpayer dollars go to Canadians first before immigrants. That's not a racist thing to say. However, you'll be made to feel racist if you suggest that in most circles now, because
Mhm.
you're being racist. You don't want immigration to happen, and then it's ridiculous. If we don't have money to feed and house our veterans properly, we don't have money to bring a bunch of military-aged males from the Ukraine in as immigrants to provide more voting base for the liberals that imported them. I thought that,
Yeah.
and anyways, in regards to that, isn't there a country at war right now? Shouldn't all the men be staying there? Aren't we supposed to just be harboring the women and the children to protect them? Not
Yeah.
not to mention the fact that we sent billions over there in aid and weapons and such, but we're already doing a lot. But what's more is we're going to harbor their women and the children, and then they're sending military aged males over. Aren't they supposed to be there fighting? That's a strange
Yeah.
thing. I know if my country was under attack, I wouldn't be leaving the fucking country and going to hide somewhere else and then asking somebody else to fucking fight it for them. That's just my opinion. I don't know.
Well, that's a great segue into one of the points I wanted to make, and you just brought up exactly a point that I was going to make, which is this: if you go look at any left wing media source at all, anyone, doesn't matter, pick one, and just look at their most recent news from Ukraine, and they're painting a picture of Putin can't hold the gateway to the eastern Ukraine, even though Russia has not expressed any interest in eastern Ukraine. They have secured the regions that they were interested in, that the Russian speaking people who live there preferred to be Russian. That's been secured. Those borders are consolidated. In fact, the people who live in those regions are now being trained to defend those regions from the Ukraine. What the Ukraine is now doing is trying to retake land that's been captured by Russia. Russia's not failing to advance. They're now defending territory. And everybody knows you can do so with less equipment and less hands than you can. It takes less bodies to defend than it does to attack. Generally speaking. So that's the propaganda, is that Russia's failing to invade the rest of Ukraine and the rest of Ukraine's holding out. No, the area of the Ukraine that is not Russian held is not Russian held because they don't care about it. It's not what they were there for. They were not there for the land. They were there to bring people out of what was a totalitarian state anti-Russian against its very own citizens who happen to be Russian. That's what all that's about, and that's one of these little propaganda wars that's going on. And we can see that even in, like Scott says, why are military age Ukrainians coming here? Well, because there's not really the level of warfare that they're claiming there is there. And like Scott says, it's just a way to buy votes. It's just like Democrats letting millions and millions of Mexican people, who many of which work for cartels and are bringing in drugs, which are killing people. They're doing that because that gets them future votes. They're investing in their future, right? And that's typically the party that's on the left tends to be the one who's always encouraging immigration, and they use that for cheap votes. And the party on the right is saying we can't have too much immigration because then our unemployment will be too high, for one thing, and because you could geopolitically radically change a country in a very short time by having crazy immigration laws. You can literally change the vote. Now, in Canada, at least we're seeing the trend of everybody's moving out of provinces that are towing Justin Trudeau's line and moving to provinces that aren't. And so that counteracts that immigration a little bit. But we really need, what we need is provincial sovereignty laws. We need provinces to follow along with Alberta and defederalize our country, which is a confederation and not a federal nation. And we need to get that back on track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jay. I think that people need to take a good quick look, at where they are, where they stand, and what they believe. I mean, don't stay lost in this current, travesty, this current theater that is media now. Shut off your TV.
And don't pick a side.
Yeah.
Pick your own fucking side. Pick the side that benefits you and your community and your family. You don't have to pick this one or that one. You can call them both out. It doesn't, you don't look silly if you're calling out both political parties. You actually look like the only person who's being honest and truthful. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, far be it from me to suggest that the Conservatives will be the buoy that gets thrown to the drowning sailor in the middle of the ocean. I would never suggest it in a million years. All of our formal, political parties in Canada have all been guilty of and are all constantly guilty of different sorts of scandals. But this, where we are now, the way that we are divided and the way that we've been labeled and the way that we've been led is so far beyond anything that I would consider remotely like Canada. It's scary to me. And I think everybody should wake up a little bit to that. I mean, we never used to have this kind of division. Much love to the brothers and sisters in the US, but they've already always had their kind of left and the right, Republican or Democrat. We've always kind of been, kind of able to sway back and forth when we felt, but there was never a hard line in the sand that you couldn't cross. And now it seems that there is, and I think that's where we shouldn't be. That's where we ought not to be, because there is a way to be accepting of things and also have a moral compass and have both of those things, or rather, let me clarify. So what I mean by a moral compass is a moral compass in the traditional sense, say a conservative sense. There is a possibility to have that and also have a more leftist view, a more, I accept that furries should be something I can identify as view. That's fine. I'm sure there's a middle ground somewhere, but we've gone way too far to the other way. And I think all of you recognize that. I don't even think there's people on the left now that are questioning the fact that they've gone too far or that this has gone too far. And certainly I've seen some examples of that online where people are like, okay, listen, I'm a gay activist, but this is way too far. This is now to the point where it's grooming. This is now to the point where it's grooming children to, as we mentioned before, to potentially adulter their sexual organs or their reproductive organs in order to match something that they have no idea they want to be because they are not fully developed in the brain. And this is the problem. This is a big problem. I think that left or right, you have to understand that we've stepped a little bit too far into the murky pool, the murky cesspool that is Marxism, because that's what this is, and we've been programmed to do it for almost 40 years now. Just
Mm.
give that some thought. I mean, you saw what Yuri said, and he's basically told you exactly what was going to happen. You know, that was 1984, so it's 40 years ago, just about 40 years ago, 38
Yeah.
to be exact.
Yeah, well, and I often say like what it looks like what it means. You know, it looks like a bunch of different things. There's a bunch of different small elements of it, but in general, it's the trying to dismiss everything on a society level that happened before 1965 as tyrannical patriarchy tilted towards white straight men, and then everybody else in the world until 1965 was just suffering completely at the hands of straight white men. And
Mhm.
everything since time has been an attempt, and part of that is to shuffle the funds around, and part of it is that there's a lot of truth to it. But I don't necessarily think that those straight white males who are actually the elite, the global elite, for the most part, I don't think it's because they're straight white males, or that they have any problem with any other gender or type of person in any way. They're just psychopathic, right? They're on a spectrum that doesn't care about race or anything else like that. They
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
they hate all human beings equally, um, and that's why you can see a very clear face of disgust when you see liberal politicians talk about traditional values and people trying to
Yeah.
hold on to some traditional values. They make a sneer, like a disgust face, and I don't think they mean to do it. I think that's just how much they hate human beings in general.
It's how much
So
it's how much they've been programmed to hate any ideology other than their own. It's how much they've been programmed to find anything repugnant and anything disgusting that doesn't support their own ideology. That
well,
doesn't.
I mean the programmers themselves here, like the programmers, and when you see disgust from them, that's
Mhm.
that is straight up psychotic. That's Charles Manson is what you're dealing with. There's
Gotcha.
like
Okay.
30 really wealthy people that are Charles Manson, and they're teaching a bunch of other people to be accepting of Charles Manson. Do you
Yeah.
know? You know,
Yep. No,
and that's
absolutely. No, I mean that's
and they're
some
doing it
might
all over
find.
the. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just gonna say some might find that a bit of an extreme comparison. I don't. I
No,
think it's pretty fucking accurate if you ask me. I mean, um,
especially when you're talking geopolitics, because I know
yep,
that Justin
yep.
Trudeau has signed pieces of paper that sentenced more people to death than Charles Manson ever did. So you want to get brass
Well, yeah.
tacks about
Yeah, I mean 34,000 last year alone
yeah,
voluntarily, apparently.
yeah.
And if you guys do some research into the MAID program, you'll find that there is a fine line, I guess, where they will accept somebody that's eligible for the program or not. But that doesn't mean that
Doesn't
it's
seem
not
very
being
fine.
that doesn't mean that it's a fine line like you and I would consider a fine line, like maybe
Yeah.
somebody who has absolute extreme conditions. That means that they are suffering with every breath and every no. That's okay. You know what? I can understand that there's a moral
Hmm.
part of somebody that might say they're suffering and it's better to put them down. Much like I would put down an animal on my farm if it was suffering and had a broken leg and there's no way I could get it fixed, or a dog or
Hmm.
something like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who have maybe some mental issues and some housing
Hmm.
issues, and you
Hmm.
can't figure out both those things. They're not suffering other than those social things. They're not suffering, but they're being offered an out in the form of a medically assisted death by our
Hmm.
government.
Yeah,
That that
and it's because they go for the radical change all the time. We could have had a slight improvement of, do you know what? Some people have no hope of having quality of life whatsoever. You know, they're terminally ill,
exactly.
or they have this condition that's
Yeah.
lifelong painful. we can maybe help those people out a bit. We could have done that in a night like that and offered and sort of shifted a little bit. Instead, what we did is go, well, we don't allow that now. Well, we should just open the floodgates. No, that's not adult behavior.
Well, it's not even about adult behavior at that point. It's like you could have turned the faucet on slightly and let us just dip our toes in the pool of the cesspool.
Let some industry standards come to exist in an organic way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, exactly. But instead, let's just open the faucet wide open and flood the bathtub, and then fuck it, just drown a bunch of people in the way, and fuck it. Who gives a shit about lives or about quality of life or about and some people might argue, I would be one of those people that might argue that this is being done to save money because it costs you less to give somebody an injection that puts them to death than it does to give them medication or a structure or housing or mental help or psychological counseling, psychiatric counseling, whatever it might be. It costs a lot more to do that than it does to just say, well, fuck it. You're a bit confused about your sexuality, or you've got a sore elbow, or you're feeling a bit down, or you can't find a place to live. Fuck it. We'll just put you to death because I don't want you to feel that way.
Yeah, there's no sense of last resort there whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem. Yeah, it's normalized. Yeah. It's way too accessible. It's all of my concerns relating to abortion are the same. It's like, there may be times and circumstances, and I'm not here to judge anybody and their life, but I don't think it should be as simple as it is. No. I don't think it should be really, really easy to do. I know that, if that makes me callous, then whatever. Yeah, I think that a human life being taken should be a difficult decision and not wake up on Saturday morning and be done with it by 4. No.
Yeah. And I agree with that. That I think is a subject for, I've got some input on that as well, but I think that might be a subject for another stream because it's a pretty in-depth subject. And I think we've already sort of dove into some deep stuff here. So I hope that
indicative of the same exact approach. So it's like, you have to care a little bit. You can't be dismissive of life. You can't.
Well, it's like my buddy Yuri said at the start of the show, demoralization. So how to make it normalized, or rather normalization, how to normalize the demoralization, how to normalize the standard we've created so that you just consider that a normal way of life. You don't look at it and go, oh shit, you shouldn't just kill people because they're not feeling, happy. Now you don't look at it that way. Now you look at it like if you say that, you're afraid to say that because you might be considered a bigot. And that's the combination of the demoralization, backed up right after that by the normalization, which is, oh no, it's normal to just kill people when they've got a sore elbow. It's normal to change a 12-year-old's gender because they said they felt like being a girl that day. It's normal. It's perfectly fucking normal. It makes perfect sense in most circles, at least nowadays.
Yeah. It's and that's the erosion of the basic values and principles that make it easier for Marxism to take over. And whether that Marxism is at the hands of China, which is sort of in China's case, they want to dominate the world themselves, or in the hands of certain organizations like, say, the WEF, where it's Marxism, but they're looking for a globalist version of that, which doesn't make it any less or more dangerous. They're both just as horrifically dangerous.
My buddy Klaus.
Yeah, we know where Marxism goes. We saw it, 20th century. Lest ye not forget, what we're not supposed to forget is that close to 160 million people that were murdered by Marxist ideology in the course of 80 years.
Yep.
Wow. So, but on that token though, what everybody's doing, what a lot of people are doing, I'll say that, what a lot of people are doing is the right thing. You get on your device, you go on whatever platform it is that you like, and you put your word out there. And do you know what? it be a troll if you want, because trolling is actually productive. What you're doing is making really sanctimonious, cocky, arrogant people annoyed, right? So troll people, give people a hard time, keep everything in focus, like Scott's saying. Don't allow it to be normalized. If it's not normalized for you, then just say that boldly, loudly, however which way you can. Do it as and it'll have the most impact if you're intelligent about it, just in general. And that's one of the things we can do. And then we need to start to organize that. I'm all for a total reform, a total change. But I think that only happens if people organize. So what I would say is if you really want a total change and an overhaul of our government, and you're not getting together with somebody at some point and discussing how that can be done on a community level, then you can assume that none of your friends are doing that, and that nobody's doing that, and therefore nothing gets advanced. Because having 18 million of us who feel this way doesn't help if we're just 18 million separate voices shouting in the dark. To create a movement, you have to organize, and so that's the stage that we need to get to. Right now, what is it? I checked it today. 14.6% of people in Canada have taken this booster that's still being put on children's TV shows, and there's still television commercials telling you to get it, etc. But right now, 14.26 people have taken it. In the last election, the current government got less votes than any other party in the government. We're not as far gone as people think. And yes, the Conservative Party isn't a whole bunch better. It's a decision of there's two bowls of shit, and you get to decide which one smells worse. And that's at least something. And then you work off of that. You work from there, right? And then you advance the ball down the field. And that's but none of that happens without discussions of solution. We all need to keep identifying it. We all need to call it out. We all need to speak on it. We all need to make it difficult for these people to do it, and support alternate media and independent journalism and everything. We all need to continue to do that. And soon we have to start doing a little bit more. And if you see, you're going to see in your mailbox, in your email or something, somebody's going to be talking about political alternatives in Canada. Don't delete it and throw it in the garbage. Maybe check it out, see what somebody has to say. Maybe that's your ticket to being part of a solution. No, it doesn't matter whose solution it is. It doesn't, to me, anything that pushes back against the consensus is great. Whatever flavor it is, whatever. Right now, the bleeding, if I'm doing triage, we're bleeding in the Liberal. That's what's bleeding us to death. And so, first step, get that out of the way as quick as possible. Then reform, change, etc., and so on. But we really need to just stop the bleeding so that we get a few more years to work on this before it gets away from us. And so that's my long diatribe on that.
No, I don't think that's lengthy, Jay. I think it's important. It needed to be said. I think that there's if you can read down here, we talk about complacency. There's far too much complacency in society now. So don't just pick a side and then decide, well, I'll wait for everybody else to figure out what to do with it. Activism, political activism is a thing. It can be peaceful, and it can be creative, and it can be proactive, and it can be full of results peacefully. So,
and thanks to the internet, it's now easier than it has ever been to organize in that way.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to organize a protest, which we're still legally allowed to do in this country for now, just not in front of the Parliament buildings in Ottawa, apparently. Well, actually, you can. You just can't make any noise, and you can't be in a vehicle. And they also changed a few laws, but we can talk about that on another stream. They changed a few laws about demonstrations and things you can and can't do because of that, which a lot of you are probably unaware. Also, in our next stream, we're going to cover, I think we're just about done here, Jay. So I just want to touch on a couple of things we're going to talk about next time. There's some major things going on in Canada. No, so we started here on Sunday with the start of this week, with it being about Canada, most specifically. Although some of it was about Western world in general. And then starting Tuesday, we want to cover some of the new bills that are going in right now. So the big C's. And Jay, if we could just give a little bit of a brief intro. So C5, C11, C21, just to name a few. Those are some pretty big deals going on. Do you want to give a quick intro to those and give a quick kind of teaser for those bills and so that people know what we're going to talk about next time?
Yeah, well, I mean, at any given time, the government's always got a whole bunch of in our parliament. The government's got a whole bunch of bills in place. Generally, they're actually a bag of goodies. A bill, they don't often do amendments to a bill's single standalone legislation. They attach them to groups because that is how you get negotiating power, right? The Liberals have to go to the Conservatives and say, hey, we want to advance this idea. In return, we'll do this, which you guys are in favor of, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, each bill will tend to have its key issue related to it. And right now we have ones ranging from medical freedoms. We have freedom. We have another amendment to FOIP that they're looking at. We have an amendment to gun control. There's no actual new laws here. They're all examining amendments to existing legislation, and they range, of course, covering our social media, how we use of social media, what can be seen on social media, what can be used, etc.
Censorship.
Yeah, a lot of C11 is basically trying to strangle independent journalism. And in addition, there's also stuff in C24 that does as well, even though that's not the core theme of C24. But yeah, there's some major ones that we can start to cover that are fairly important. And in particular, the one thing that most outlets are missing is, for instance, in the case of C11, there's actually 9 different amendments in that bill. Covering a wide variety of things. So it'd be nice if we could maybe cover that a little bit further down the rabbit hole of other people and say this is the key theme of this amendment, but in addition there is blank blah 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 blah.
Yeah, and so what I noticed with some of that stuff is there seems to be a lot of just sort of glancing over it. Here's the bill, and it's but there's some very, very specific things we want to be very well aware of in those bills, and because I am one of those, I'm guilty of this. I used to be guilty of this. Now I'm the other way around. But because I used to be one of those that would see, oh, Bill C11, that sounds about as exciting as reading the ingredients list on a box of Cheerios. So I get it. So we will try our best to break them down in a bit more of an interesting way with our beautiful faces and wonderful voices, in the hopes that you will be able to take it in a little bit, to palletize it a little bit better, so that you're not like, fucking politics are boring. I get it, but this is important shit, and I figure if we cover it, at least that many more people will have it broken down into our understanding and our breakdown of it, and that could make a critical difference. I mean, if there are 10 more people that find out what this actually will do and what this actually will mean, then maybe out of those 10 people, they tell 5 people we're already that much further ahead. So that's what we're going to try and do over the next week here. I think we'll start on Tuesday with the first little bit. We'll get that ready for you. Jay, I think we will be able to continue that on Thursday. There's a lot to cover. So I think I'd like to cover that Tuesday and Thursday, because there's so much material there for everybody. And then if you guys want to, you can contact us in our channel here through the chat, or by commenting on any of the videos. If there's more stuff or more of the details of those bills, or any particular part you want to see us cover a little bit more, let us know. We'll do that for you.
Yeah. Our the email address is on the YouTube page too. So if you like one-on-one personalized email, you can send an email and we'll get back to you on that too.
Absolutely, yeah. Please don't send me any more pictures like you guys did last week, because those are not appropriate. There'll be a number of
Oh,
that.
one more thing regarding what Scott was saying about these things don't seem that interesting. You know what else doesn't seem that interesting? Changing the oil in your vehicle. But what happens when you don't change the oil in your vehicle? It doesn't run properly, it breaks down, you lose mileage, you don't get everything you should get out of your
Mhm.
vehicle.
Mhm.
Democracy is like that. There's maintenance that has to be done. And the maintenance that has to be done on democracy is you can't be ignorant of what goes on in your country, or you will not be able to be a productive member of the society. And you could get arrested for something that you don't know about. And you could look up one day and go, well, why is this all like this? Well, because we elected the wrong people and then we didn't say anything while they were passing all these bills. Well, I never listened to those bills. I don't know what those are. Well, that's why you don't know. Yeah, it's boring. There's lots of things that are in life that are boring, absolutely. But that stops being an excuse for anything the day that you turn 18. You don't get to say, oh, that's boring. It's too bad. You're an
Yeah,
adult. You're in charge of
you
the
know what?
society.
True that, Jay. And on that note, I'd like to wrap it here. Let that sink in. What Jay just said is extremely important. If you don't want to have your engine seize you, change the oil. Let that sink in a little bit, and let that carry you through to the next stream here with us on the Unacceptables. Thank you for joining us. Much love, people. We're out for now.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
Cheers.